That's really odd. Thank you.
Right.
When you are.
Good afternoon all, and welcome to the Vale Glamorgan Council's Cabinet meeting on the 17th of July 2025. I'm Councillor Liz Burnett, and Chair of the meeting as the leader of the Vale Glamorgan Council and Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources. We'll, as usual, be using the Council's hybrid platform. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be uploaded to the Vale Glamorgan Council's website as soon as practicable after the meeting. As usual, microphones should be muted when not speaking to avoid any background noise or feedback. Anyone online, I know we have some online, wishing to speak should activate their request to speak function. Those in the chamber can obviously indicate by raising their hands as usual. Finally, the chat function is to highlight any technical issues or to get the attention of the Democratic Services officers. So on that, we can move forward onto the agenda, and the first item is apologies for absence. I believe we have a full quote today, but is everybody online
that's right.
here?
Everyone's either represented in the chamber or online.
That's brilliant, thank you. So next one, agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of July 2025. Can I take those as a true record?
And I'll second those.
Thank you. We've then agenda item 4. Oh, I haven't done declarations of interest. I always forget that, and I underlined it as well. So can I just check whether we've got any declarations of interest today? I haven't had any notified.
No, there were none received for this meeting. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. So we can get back on to where I was in terms of the agenda. So agenda item 4 is the a reference from the Resources Scrutiny Committee, and this is the Task and Finish Group on the review of the Vale Glamorgan Council's procurement policy, function and strategy. This was marked on the agenda as to follow. It actually only came in yesterday. It's a comprehensive piece of work, and I attended the Scrutiny Committee to hear the discussions, but on reflection, I've taken the decision that we will hold this over, if we note it and hold it over. And I want to actually hold over agenda item 8 as well, which I'll mention when we get there, so that we can consider both in a lot more depth and bring it back to the first Cabinet meeting in September, if that's okay. So if I move that we note and hold the report over.
And I'll second that.
Super, thanks. Actually, if it's not too late, I would like to thank the Task and Finish group for it is a large piece of work and seemed to go well beyond the parameters set for the Task and Finish, which is part of the reason why it would be good to consider it in more depth. Agenda item 5 is the Glamorgan Heritage Coast Advisory Committee, or Advisory Group. I was thinking of the Cardiff Bay Advisory Committee. This is a super group. I used to be on it, and there was always lots of really interesting conversation. And on this one, there was information from Paul Locke, the site ranger. Always a wealth of information. A lot of the work there was around rights of way and the funding that we've been able to use from the Shared Prosperity Fund. There was also talk about the Welsh Government Coastal Access Improvement Grant, and that was from the Countryside Access Manager, and an update on the Coastal Community Capacity Building Fund from the County Ecologist, who again is also really good. It's quite interesting to talk about the initiative by National Resources Wales to where the aim was to consult and engage with communities and businesses along the heritage coast to understand the ecological requirements aimed at improving nature. So I said that's a really interesting one. And other projects, one I was really interested in was marine life rescue and assistance projects for stranded animals and fish. And I haven't tended to see so much of that around here. I've got friends that rescue seals and, well, a minke whale the other week in Scotland, but haven't really seen anything here. So it'd be interesting to know more about that. And then they were talking about a beach resource library to encourage the reuse of beach toys. And we've actually got a couple of those that are very successful on Barry Island. So it would be good to see that idea shared. So I'd like to thank them for what looks like a really interesting meeting. I'm wondering if I can get myself along to one of them. That would be good. So if we can note the minutes of that meeting.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. Agenda, this is on to my reports now. Agenda item 6 is arrangements for Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee for the 2025-26 municipal year. And I would imagine that Councillor Birch wants to say something as the current chair of the committee. But there's been a lot of discussion. I mean, if you look at Vale 2030, our 5-year plan, there's a lot of discussion about the importance of the voluntary sector and community groups and how we work with them. But for some reason, the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee has struggled to find the best way of working, and so quite often the attendance is quite low. Third sector organisations quite often only having 1 or 2 attendees at the meeting. And I suppose if we want to work more closely with the voluntary sector, as we do, we probably need to have a look at how that might work better. I mean, I can reassure Cabinet that even though the meetings have proved slightly sort of calmer, quieter than we would have wished, there have been regular monthly meetings between the council and the chief exec of the Glamorgan Voluntary Services. So that relationship is ongoing, but it's how do we broaden that? So the suggestion is that we agree to temporarily pause the meetings of the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee for the 25-26 municipal year, to allow for a proper review of working arrangements with the third sector, and that we agree the proposed approach in revising arrangements in working with the third sector. So, as I said, hopefully that we'll find a more effective way forward, that we can have the type of communication and conversations that we would want. So it's just those 2 recommendations for us on this, and I'd move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Super. And I can see, as I thought that she would want to, Councillor Birch's hand is up. Rhiannon, do you want to come in? Are you having problems connecting? We can see that you're connected. Oh, there we are.
Right, sorry, completely my fault. Right, okay, to start again then. Yes, I'm very pleased to have this report, because I think it's overdue, to be honest. We've looked at several ways in the past of trying to make this committee be appreciated by all participants in a way that it's not being at the moment. I mean, I think that some councillors, for example, don't appreciate the importance of our relationship with the third sector and don't understand or properly value the contribution they make towards the services that we assist them to offer. And I think that the voluntary sector hasn't always seen the value in it either, as as evidenced by the fact that not all of the voluntary sector places are taken up on the committee. So I'm all in favour of any kind of rejigging of the relationship, which ensures that it is fulfilling the task it was set out. It was meant to provide. So I'm very pleased with this. I think that a thorough discussion with the third sector about how they think the best way forward is for them to report on what they're doing, and for councillors to appreciate just how much the third sector adds to the services that we are providing. So, you know, I think that this will be a good move, and I look forward to a kind of quite a robust conversation with the third sector about how they feel they could be reporting to us in a way that is, you know, clearly understandable and made relevant to all councillors and constituents.
Yeah, thanks, Rhiannon. And you know, it's a question of, the reports are really useful to help us understand exactly what the issues are, but also if we can find an effective format to allow a constructive dialogue with the third sector, so that we actually are open to suggestions of, you know, what are the most effective ways of us working together. So thank you. That was moved and seconded, and no dissent here, so that's agreed. Going on to agenda item 7, this is the financial strategy for 2026-27 right through to 2030-31. It's this time of the year. We've already been working on budget type stuff for a good month by now, but I suppose this is probably the first stake in the ground in terms of looking at where we are and the sort of initial building blocks of how we get through into a budget in March of next year, and the different steps that we're going to take. So the report actually goes through the assumptions in the medium-term financial plan, and they were approved by the council in March. And I think we have to recognise that our budget is not set in isolation, that we've now got our new 5-year corporate plan, Vale 2030. And so we have to make decisions now to deliver that plan. And that provides a framework for us. So the financial strategy looks at how we use the council's resources to deliver the council's objectives. And one of the key things is ensuring that services, as is laid out in our in Vale 2030, is ensuring that services for the most vulnerable are maintained. I think it goes without saying that there's a significant funding gap in 26-27 and across the medium term. There's been a spending review from the UK government, and then there's been recently a briefing from Welsh government, but not a spending review as such. The gap for 2026-27 is currently forecast at just over 13 million. And that's with a forecast of cost pressures of about 18 million, but likely funding only an additional 5.6 million. But we can't say that at the moment. The key driver of costs is inflation, and with nearly 15 million of pressure coming through on pay awards, national insurance, there's a net cost to us, and I think that we've got a working assumption of a 1% per annum growth in terms of funding for 26-27, and that's based on the fiscal review from Welsh Government from 2023. The report, I think I've already seen headlines about, you know, what the council are going to charge for you know, increased council tax by. We can't say that at this point. We can't say that, you know, for quite a while. We assume, in terms of our figures, we assume about 3.9, or we assume 3.9%, but that's purely for planning purposes at the moment. And there are a lot of decisions and tough choices to be made between now and then. But I think some of the stuff that is very useful in the report is that, I mean, if you have a look at from 1.5 onwards, at 1.8 you've got the chart which actually shows the funding that we get, which is the AEF, the aggregate external finance per capita per capita. And I can, sadly say that the Vale has the second lowest finance per capita in Wales. If you have a look at council tax rates, we actually are the 6th lowest council tax. That's the Band B equivalent in Wales. So we keep our council tax low, but we also have a low settlement. So as a result, our net expenditure per head, if you look at 1.11, we are the 3rd lowest in Wales. So we talk about being a prudent council, we talk about providing cost-effective services, but then there are questions that we have to ask around that. So if you actually look at 1.13 in terms of comparisons between what we spend and what other people in Wales might spend, is if you look at adult social care, we are classified as low in comparison to other local authorities in Wales. If you look at children's and families, we're very low. We're very low on cultural and related budget areas. But yet in education, we are at the high level. Not at the top, but we are at the high level. But then I suppose drawing attention to environmental and regulatory services and highways and transports, we are very low. And actually, quite often those are the areas where people say that they would want to see more. And this is a question that we have to ask during the year as to whether or not having a very low level of expenditure on that is where we should be. But if it's not where we should be, how do we get it? 1.15 sets out what we spend the budget on. And, schools are 39%, just purely for schools. But then you can look at things like learning and skills and that sort of stuff, and school transport, which will boost it up, and then social care. So you can see exactly what we spend our budget on. And then I'd mentioned the corporate plan. Currently, the objectives that we have for the corporate plan, which should be in our minds as we're going forward with the budget, is that we want to create great places to live, work and visit. So that comes alongside when you look at the environment, etc. type expenditure. Respecting and celebrating the environment. Well, there's been a lot of discussion about that recently, hasn't there? But we have to decide how we fund it. Giving everyone a good start in life, and that comes down to our education, our social care, etc. Supporting and protecting those who need us, and being the best council we can be. So sometimes we have to invest in things like digital facilities, etc., to make sure that we can provide the services in a timely manner with the quality that people want in the council. The financial strategy is laid out about halfway down page 9 at paragraph 2.7, and that's talking about those areas, about a focus on supporting the most vulnerable, about how we deliver the corporate plan, how we make sure our finances are sustainable, how we maintain an appropriate level of reserves. And I think we saw from the closure of accounts this year that we cannot continue with an unplanned use of reserves. Generating local tax revenue, so that's in terms of council tax policy. Fees and charges, how do we apply that in terms of additional funding, and the collective responsibility within the council in terms of managing the finances. There is a little bit in terms of paragraph 2.21 talking about the overall economic prospects for local government. And it is difficult, if you talk to councils right across the UK, the challenges we face are not unusual. we're not unique, and in fact we're not in as difficult a place as others, but we could be there. So we base a lot of the stuff that we do on the information and the responses that residents within the Vale give us, and there's section paragraph 2.42 onwards talks about the Life in the Vale survey. Well, we're hoping to rerun that later this year. The 4,000 responses that we got have helped us to provide some insight into the services that we deliver with the basis of evidence. And it's good to hear that 19 out of the other 21 local authorities are actually going to be conducting a similar survey. We were the first local authority to do that. And they've seen the impact of it, so they're going to do similar. There's a section on some of the pressures, the private rental house costs, which are creating issues within housing and homelessness. The review of the medium-term financial plan, which we will go at further, and the also things that we've discussed earlier in the year to do with service transformation. So, you know, things like digital innovation and strengthening communities, that sort of thing. So a lot of this is a refresh of information that we would have visited earlier in the year, and we will revisit as we go on through the year. So this is going to go to the Council's resources scrutiny, so I will leave further conversation of it until we get there, so that we can have a discussion rather than just me talking to it. There are 7 recommendations before us today. As I said, I've already mentioned it's going to scrutiny committee, and any recommendations coming back to us for cabinet, us for consideration. Rather than read all those out, I'm going to move them en bloc. But first of all, I think Councillor Wilson wants to come in.
Yeah, thanks very much, Leader. Yes, I mean, I think this is really very much a very important document, one of the most important documents we have in Cabinet every year. And really, I think this really focuses about what we're about as a council. And even you look at the title of the 4 scrutiny committees, you know, resources, living well, starting well, you know, and place, all very much about the themes that we are very concerned, we're focused on. And I think clearly that's something that we will echo in that financial strategy. And I think it's very important. You know, I know in many areas we are very lean and we're very efficient. And we will continue to do so, especially the efficiency of it, because it's important that the public understands that. It's also important that an awful lot of our money does go in education and social services, 71%. And I think this is something that we're trying to protect the vulnerable. We're trying to protect those who are starting up in life. But also we want to emphasise the fact that we want people to have a good life in the Vale. The Vale is known for its amazing quality of life, and we want to continue that. So I'm very supportive of this strategy. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, it's quite interesting to look at the balancing act. I was in a conversation earlier this week about visitor levy, and the question is, if we were to adopt such a thing, we would raise rough figures less than, well under half of what it costs us to pick litter on Barry Island. You know, sort of last year, £850,000. So it is a question of where are those balances? How do we make all this fit together? And this is the conversation that we will have. And the more that we can encourage local residents to get involved with this, that would be absolutely brilliant. But anyway, I have moved the 7 recommendations.
So I'll formally second them.
I shall stop rabbiting on, and can't see anyone wanting to indicate. So that's agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 8, as we mentioned, or as I mentioned earlier, we are going to put this off until, we're going to defer this till September. Don't need to note it or anything, do we? Just turn it off.
Just to note that it's been deferred.
That's good. Excellent. We shall see that again, first meeting back in September. Agenda item 9, I apologise for, you know, all the sort of confidentiality and all that sort of thing, but this is a sort of necessity in terms of legal processes. So this report actually has a confidential part 2 report later on in the agenda, where we will deal with all the commercially confidential parts of it. But we wanted to actually allow people to know what was going on and our ambitions for the town. This is being dealt with by me because of the resources aspect and the finance aspect. As this develops, it will go into the portfolio of the deputy leader, who is rubbing her hands with glee. But this report is about the purchase of an empty building in Barry for the economic benefit of the town. And so what we're looking at today is to seek approval from Cabinet to use an existing approved loan to enable the acquisition of property, and to seek approval to use an existing approved loan to cover associated costs linked to the purchase, and then to seek approval that to amend the 2025-26 capital programme in line with the purchase amount. So as this moves forward, it would go under our capital programme. So, you know, just in terms of background, as I said, we have been able to access a Transforming Towns loan from Welsh Government to support this opportunity, as I said, to secure a town centre freehold to support regeneration in Barry, and we are very keen. We're not we haven't completely sort of bottomed out the end use, and we would foresee that future options will be developed collaboratively with businesses, local partners and stakeholders via the Barry and Vale place boards that are currently being established to find a way forward. But I know that that discussions are already going on in terms of possibilities and how we can make such an opportunity work. So there's not a huge amount more to talk about on this. We'll talk more about it on part 2. And so the only recommendation that I've got for this is that the full detail, content and recommendations are approved as set out in the part 2 Cabinet report. So we just note this for now, don't we? Thank you.
And I'll formally second that, delightfully.
I was going to say very enthusiastically, yes. So, and I really hope that we can bring more news forward before long. Agenda item 10 is a standard item, the use of Chief Executive's emergency powers. Much talked about recently, use of emergency powers, but they are specifically used normally when something's already been agreed, to move it along. Say we've got a grant or there's a contract to be signed that's already been agreed by Cabinet, and they're laid out in the report. There, you know, stuff about some early years provision that's been agreed. Something very simple, like the acquisition of a small parcel of land to allow a bus shelter in Llandoch. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was because the other bus shelter got knocked down, so they've moved it back a bit so that it's not vulnerable to being hit by a bus, which the other one was. So it can be big, it can be small, but they're all backed up by full documentation, sign off by the scrutiny chair, chief exec, cabinet members, leader, etc. So were there any that anybody wanted to comment on this?
Yes, Leader. I think it's it's a really interesting report, and I think I'd like to draw everybody's attention to is under K, which is on page 5, about the Brilliant Basics funding that we received. That we received £300,000 from Welsh Government for toilet refurbishments, and those refurbishments will take place at Porth, Kerry and Cosmeston Country Parks. I'm really delighted to have that approved and to actually receive that money, because everybody who's used those facilities will know that they are long overdue, those toilet refurbishments. And I think it, particularly in relation to Porth Kerry, we've done a huge amount of work there the last couple of years, just completed now the resurfacing the car park. And this will be that final piece in that jigsaw, I think, to really bring that up to a place that's one of the jewels in our crown, and we've got several of them. So, and obviously then at Cosmeston as well, I know they're well overdue as well.
Yeah.
So I'm really delighted to have this one.
And also that fits in very well with the recent announcement of the toilets being refurbished on Barry Island,
Yeah,
and
for the change in
and
facilities,
and also the change in facilities and the new beach wheelchairs.
yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, some. I think that was Brilliant Basics money from Welsh Government as well.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did I see Gwyn wanted to come in?
Yeah, Leader, I just wanted to mention, it's only a small item, but it's on page 9, Rectory Farm, Langley Hamel. Basically, I'm so delighted that we're doing this house up so it can go back to the land of diocese, because there's no one, whilst we leased this farm for many years, we don't need the lease anymore. It's empty, we're waiting for it to go back. So it's our responsibility to make sure it goes back in good condition. So I'm delighted to see that work is going ahead, and then we can release that land. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks, Gwyn. So I've moved that.
And I'll formally second. Oh,
And we've also got Councillor Williams, and then we've got Councillor Birch. So yes, Eddie first.
Thank you, Leader. It would be remiss of me not to mention two particular aspects. The early years and childcare, the Pupils, there was an increased grant, and for us to be able to spend that within the times, then that's on the impact on families and the youngsters. That early prevention is fabulous, so it's really important that we recognise that, where that money's come from. And also on the next item underneath that was the ICLA, which is the temporary movement of staff within the buildings. Many of you have seen the buildings, and the accommodation is not in the state it should be, so that's helping the staff. But in the result of that is, if the staff are in a better place, then obviously the work will be better and outputs will be better. So thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. No, I think that they're both very worthwhile things. And Rhiannon, you want to come back in?
Yes, well, there's a number of things that I'd like to comment on. I mean, if you look at item B, which is the primary roof renewal in Llanfair, long overdue, which is so I'm very pleased that we're being able to appoint a contractor on that one. I mean, as he's already mentioned, the early years one in point C. Obviously, we're looking for best quality childcare for children everywhere, and I think this is to be welcomed. If you look at item F, which is the library, anything that improves our libraries and the uptake of our library services by members of the public is to be welcomed. What else do I want to comment on? Item G, contract procedure with Ysgol Deri. I mean, we know that it's going to be, these things are expensive, but obviously we need to cater for all of our children to as high a standard as possible as we can manage, and this will help us with that. What else do I want to comment on? L, there's a number of small projects being undertaken across a number of schools. It's all there in the report, all of which is to be welcomed. And I think that, oh no, item Q, I think I was on as well. Where are we? The education cloud. Anything that's to improve children's learning has got to be welcomed. I think the last one was T, which is the hub programme. And obviously this is really important for all schools, boards of governors, all of these things that enable people to stay in touch and get as much information as possible is to be welcomed. Thank you.
Super, thank you. Yes, for a fairly standard report, there's an awful lot going on, isn't there? So thanks all. So I've moved, Bronwyn seconded, and I think everyone's spoken on that just about. So yes, that's agreed. My last report, and actually I'm absolutely delighted to bring this report to Cabinet today. And this is where I'm asking Cabinet for agreement to proceed with the accreditation process to become a real living wage employer. The Council actually informally adopted the real living wage in February 2023. So we brought it to Cabinet in June 2022, just after this administration came to power, and then we informally adopted it. Because until you know you can do something, it's probably best to work towards. So a lot, I'm not being dismissive, but to say, oh, we're working towards, and then having glitches is difficult. We feel now is the time that we can go for full accreditation. So I said we've been working towards it for over 2 years now, so I think in effect it's a fairly straightforward report, except for something that will mean a huge amount. I think what I found quite difficult, and I don't know, how much it applies, but people just on the minimum wage increasingly find themselves having to apply for universal credit, that they have not got enough money to live on. And this is not a huge amount, but it will make a difference, just that small amount of extra money an hour. So the benefits of being accredited are laid out on paragraph 2.5. The Wellbeing and Future Generations Commissioner also outlines, a number of challenges, and encourages local authorities to become accredited. In terms of the Council's considerations, they're laid out from paragraph 2.17 onwards in terms of the number of people who would be affected. And, through that there are other sort of considerations that we might want to look at, because going into full accreditation, this means it's not just the Council, it's the Council's supply chain. And if it's the Council's supply chain, then there may be financial implications if we are expecting people to pay their staff. But I think the only thing I can say is it's the right thing to do. Being accredited as a real living wage employer and making sure it goes through everything that we do is the right thing to do. So there's only one recommendation on this, it's that simple, and that's that Cabinet approves the proposal set out in this report for the Council to apply for formal accreditation to become a real living wage employer. And I would very definitely move.
Yeah. And I'll formally second that, and I'm proud to second this report here today, because I think it sets out our commitment as the Council as an employer to our staff. And I know it's something we've been working towards for quite some time. So this feels like it's that final piece of the jigsaw to actually embed it into our culture. So, yeah, very proud to second that.
I can see that Mark, Councillor Wilson, you've got your hand up if you want to come in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. And I'm absolutely delighted that we have brought this report. And at last, we are now a real living wage employer. And I think that is so important, not just because of the kite mark and what it means, but also it means that we provide leadership to other companies to follow our lead as well within the Vale Glamorgan. And that's important. We have got so many brilliant employers in the Vale Glamorgan, and we just want them to also think about accreditation as well, so we can work with them and be partners with us. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And Gwyn, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I share your enthusiasm and delight with this, Leader. As a former trade union shop steward many years ago, I certainly have been through all this system in the past where people were paid peanuts for their work. And quite honestly, this is great news that we're moving forward. We're leading the way. That's a big thing, I think, and making sure that everybody that works for us will follow suit. Thank you.
Thanks, Gwyn. I think that the support for this is evident. And I think if I can share with you that when the reports went live, I shared with one of our union representatives that we were going to do it and it would be on this cabinet. And they were absolutely over the moon. They'd worked towards this for a number of years and had supported it. And to know that we were going to do this today, that it really did make a huge difference to them that he's working for an organisation whose values he can share. So no, really, really thrilled. But I will leave it there for now, and I'll just sort of continue to be happy quietly. So moving on to the next agenda item, that is agenda item 12, and this is a report of the Cabinet Member for Education, Arts and Welsh Language. Over to you, Rhiannon.
Thank you. So this report is about Cabinet approval for the proposal to create new delivery models for enhanced and sustainable specialist provision. So the consultation is about establishing a new English medium specialist resource at Holton Primary School or any other suitable venue within the Vale for effect from the 1st of January next year or as soon as possible thereafter. A pilot provision is currently operating at Holton Road in order to form our decision making on what to do next. And to introduce an expanded model of the local authorities agreement engagement service currently being delivered by Ysgol Deri. So this consultation is from 8th of September to the 17th of October 25 and will be part of a wider strategy to ensure that ALN specialist education provision in the Vale is responsive, sustainable and evolves to meet existing and future challenges. You will all know that the number of ALN children goes up every year. So the background of this is that there's been a growth in additional learning needs, and it's increased exponentially across our overall provision in specialist education, and we need to consolidate access, to widen the access to specialist support, training and interventions across all our schools. Information gathered suggests that due to an increase of pupils with social, emotional and mental health, SEMH, a more strategic approach is needed to improve sustainability of our services for all our pupils. So this consultation will be in two parts. The English medium specialist resource at Holton Road or elsewhere, and to introduce an expanded model of our engagement service. Ysgol Deri is doing this at the moment, and it will be started as a pilot in the autumn term so we can better make a decision. This means a change to the existing provision, which is at a bont. That's a resource base currently situated at High School Primary. It acts as a centre of excellence for behavioural, emotional and social difficulties, provides a stimulating and rich environment and specialist staff to cater with children with SEMH needs on a full-time basis. Places are offered on a full-time basis with dual registration at their home school, and they operate as a revolving door with the expectation that following a period of intervention and specialist support, pupils will be able to leave the resource base and be reintegrated back into full-time mainstream education. You will know that there are other provisions within primary schools in the Vale that do exactly the same thing. There's a deaf unit, for example, there's a specialist unit at Glamorgan where the same principle operates, where children have a home school and they go back to their home school after a period of specialist help. The provision at a bond has been successful and there are areas of best practice, but the scope is limited given the demand, and the pressures on High Street Primary and operating the base have been disproportionate because there's such a demand across the county. We also need to think about specialist English medium educational provision for children aged 4 to 11. This will be to support individual learners and improve the capacity of the home school to create a fully inclusive environment where all learners are given the opportunity to succeed and to gain access to education that meets their needs. The SRB would provide periods of integrated provision for pupils with a diagnosis on an autism spectrum and those experiencing significant social communication, interaction or regulation difficulties. We might call this behavioural. This will include pupils whose high level of anxiety is impacting on their ability to access mainstream education. The team of specialist teachers and learning support assistants, LSAs, work together with the engagement service, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, educational psychologists and parents to provide learning experiences that cater for the education, communication, emotional, social and sensory needs of each pupil. They will be able to attend the SRB part-time 2 days while maintaining a supported place at their local mainstream school, their home school. Pupils in reception to Year 2 would attend the base on a part-time basis, and these placements would enable pupils to continue to learn alongside and interact socially with their mainstream peers in their home school. The two provisions would work together to remove barriers to ongoing inclusion within the mainstream school and build its capacity to meet the child's future educational need. There will be specialist teaching and interventions alongside advice, mentoring and training for staff from the pupil's home school so that the child will be prepared to go back to its home school, the mainstream school, with the staff fully equipped to deal with anything that might arise. It'll be for a set period of 2 terms to start with. Regular reviews and assessments of all pupils take place to determine the most appropriate education provision to meet these needs. On agreement to place, the pupil will be dual registered at the home school and at the specialist provision, and the local authority, that's us, will prepare and maintain IDPs, individual development plans, for all pupils attending the SRB. And then after 2 terms, the progress will be assessed to determine whether the child would continue to need that or whether the child will be able to return to full inclusion in their home school. It may be that the child needs to remain within the SRB for a longer period. There's also going to be, of course, an expanded model of the local authorities engagement service. Ysgol and Deri is doing this at the moment. So we're going to leverage the existing early intervention base, the EIB provision, to achieve 3 main advantages. Prioritise early intervention and an equitable graduated response for pupils with SEMH needs in primaries. Pilot an expanded model of EIB to mirror the scope of the engagement service. Utilise the existing EIB building and resources at St Joseph's Primary School to provide part-time placements for children with SEMH difficulties and neurodiverse social communication, interaction and sensory regulation difficulties. We want to develop 2 distinct specialist ES teams linked to the EIB to deliver enhanced outreach for children in nursery to Year 1, building on the successful pilot of EIB outreach during 23 to 24. Prioritise early intervention and an equitable graduated response for the youngest pupils with SMH within secondary schools. Develop a small secondary specialist ES team to provide advice, support and interventions for Year 7s with SEMH and neurodiverse conditions with or without a diagnosis, because very often children have to wait a long time for a diagnosis even when the problems are apparent. This would mirror ES support for primary schools and build on a successful pilot we've carried out 23 to 25. Outreach, advice and support for schools with pupils with neurodiverse conditions in Year 8 to 11 to be delivered by Whitmore and Pencoitra. They have specialist resource bases. Deliver specialist interventions for schools in year 3 to year 6 within mainstream schools, building on the successful work already taking place. So if we could go to the recommendations, which are 2, the Cabinet authorises the Director of Learning and Skills to undertake a consultation on the proposal to develop new delivery models for enhanced and sustainable specialist provision, and that Cabinet refers this report to the Starkwell Scrutiny Committee for consideration as part of the proposed consultation exercise, with any recommendations referred to Cabinet for consideration. So I'd like to move those recommendations.
Thanks, Rhiannon. I'm happy to second. And interestingly, I was in a discussion with other local authorities this week, and one of the key things that people were talking about is the need for inclusion, the need for young people to stay as close as possible to their homes, still with their peer groups, still in their community. And the more that we can achieve that by providing provision in resource bases, and I think we've already proved with the resource base, the secondary school resource base in Whitmore High School, and I think there's one in Pencoitra now, where children are able to get support alongside being in mainstream education, has proved the success of the model. So I think it'd be really good to have this consultation to see if people share with our hopes for those children. So I said happy to second. Have no hands up, no dissent, so that's agreed. Thank you. But you can't escape.
Thank you. And if I could just come back on that, an increasing number of authorities see the value of children being educated in this way, so that they are only spending part of their time in specialist provision, and most of their time they're spending within their home school. Because although some children will need extra help with various parts of their behaviour, their academic success and so forth, they also need to have the same experiences within mainstream schooling as every other child. Because I think there's a danger otherwise of children being educated in parallel rather than being integrated. And I think it's very important that children have as many of the ordinary childhood experiences as possible to enable them to live in an outside world where everyone's had those same experiences.
Yes,
thank you.
Totally agree. So the next agenda item is actually talking about the end of the scale where more specialist support is required, and I think we've discussed this before as a cabinet, and this is the new charging policy for out of county pupils attending Ysgol Deri. So back to you again.
Thank you. So this report is going to outline the proposed new charging structure for out-of-county pupils at Ysgol Deri from this September. The current charges for Ysgol Deri rely on an outdated method of categorisation based on whether a pupil has autism, physical medical needs or moderate learning difficulties. This structure will ensure the cost for out-of-county pupils accurately reflects the actual cost of educating the pupils and brings charges in line with the provisions of the special school funding formula. So Ysgol Deri is funded via a formula based on pupil bandings, A to E, where the formula funding of each band is based on the level of need each pupil requires in terms of teaching and LSA ratios, therapies and resources. And aligning the costs and charges for out-of-county pupils with a special school funding formula will ensure that charges are reflective of the actual cost per pupil. So for a bit of background, the current recoupment charges for out-of-county pupil placements at Ysgol Deri are based on the diagnosed condition of each pupil, charges varying on whether a pupil has autism, physical medical needs. I mean, we have tube-fed children with central lines, etc. And charges vary on whether on these matters and moderate learning difficulties. This is historic and originates from a time prior to the opening of YYD, where there were 3 separate special schools in the Vale that accommodated different pupils based on their diagnosed condition. So all of these pupils are now educated at one school, and there used to be, I think, a school for the deaf. There was there was Eredelin, and I think there was another unit along there as well for children with behavioural difficulties. So the funding formula was reviewed in 1617 and a new formula was implemented April 17. It provides funding to the school based on each pupil's level of need rather than their diagnosed condition. Pupils are assigned to bands, categories A to B, varying based on the level of support and relevant teaching and LSA ratios required for each pupil. This new formula recognises that the level of support required by each pupil is not always driven by a pupil's diagnosed condition, because of course all of these children, whatever their conditions, are individuals. As the historic charging policy for out-of-county pupils is based on pupil condition rather than the special schools funding formula banding system, the charges to other local authorities do not always reflect the actual cost of each pupil to the council. Some charges are more than the formula cost and some charges are less. So this new policy will be introduced from September 25. There are currently 21 pupils attending Ysgol and Deri that reside in other local authorities, 14 from Cardiff and the remaining 7 from Bridgend, Caerphilly, Newport and Rhondda and Taff. 3 primary and 18 secondary aged out-of-county pupils, a higher proportion of pupils being in the older year groups. Implementation of the new charging policy would result in a clear, auditable methodology for charging, which can be traced back to the funding formula for the school. The proposed charges are calculated based on a variable cost per pupil, which will be linked to the special school funding formula banding system, a proportion of the fixed costs allocated within the special school funding formula, and an admin fee based on 5% of the lowest charge. There's a table in the report, which I think may surprise some people. A band A pupil, which is the lowest band, a child is going to cost £14,308 per year. Whereas Band E, for children with the most complex need, another child would be costing £77,310. I think people are constantly surprised by how expensive education is for any child. And these children obviously have extra needs that need to be catered to, but this is the price of it. And people wonder where council spending goes. And this is one of the answers. I mean, I would like everyone to see that report to understand just what we are spending our money on. For each financial year, the charges will be updated to reflect each year's new special school funding formula, because obviously these things will change. Some local authorities are also charged a capital value of 13,000 and plus pennies per pupil, which was directed in the school's investment strategy fund. And this capital charge is to ensure that other local authorities had contributed to the building costs of Ysgol and Deri. Not all authorities are charged this. It's only charged at the present for Bridgend, Caerphilly, Newport and RCT, but not Cardiff, because they donated a lump sum to the capital project. And this capital fee will cease from September 25 this year, obviously. So we have a recommendation that Cabinet approves the new charging policy for out-of-county pupils at Ysgol and Deri from September 25. And I'd like to move that recommendation, please.
Super. Yeah, I think, as I said, we went through the report originally in its sort of draft form. So happy to second. And everybody is content here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 14, and this is for the Cabinet member for public sector housing and tenant engagement. And I'm not going to read all of the title, but it's housing, fire door servicing, maintenance, repairs, installation and inspections framework. So over to you, Sandra.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I won't read the title again because I'm going to mention it in my summary. So this report is to advise Cabinet of the requirement to amend the housing fire door servicing, maintenance, repairs, installation and inspection framework 2022 to 25 contract. And there's one recommendation as part 1, and that Cabinet notes the content of the report with a view to taking decisions on the award of the contract uplifted schedule of rates, source detailed in part 2 report later on in this agenda. So I'd like to move that recommendation, Chair. Leader.
Thank you. And as I said, the background to it is laid out in section 1, and sort of in a very brief way lays out the reasons behind it. So happy to second that, and we can discuss more fully in part 2. So We've now got a number of reports for the Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health. The first one is agenda item 15, and that's to a contract for the provision of supported daycare service for older people and people living with dementia in the Western Vale. Over to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Leader. This report is to seek authority to undertake a retender process for an existing service, and the service relates to supported daycare for older people and people living with dementia in the West Vale. So I'd like to enter into a contract with a successful provider following a retender process. The Vale of Glamorgan Adult Services have operated a day service for older people within the Vale for over 20 years, and the service is currently being provided by Havard Care. The service was delivered by Havard Care in the Gathering Place Church in St Athan up until September 2024, whereby it was then moved to Ilted House in Voluntary, which provided more space for activities as well as more opportunities for older people to access the local community. Following recommission, the contract is envisaged to commence in January 2026. It's well known, isn't it, that loneliness and social isolation can have a significant impact, negative impact on people's health. And so it's important that we continue with this provision. The Welsh Government reviewed the impact of loneliness, and it's clear that the intervention is seen as necessary. The Adult Service Commission Havard Care to provide the day service for up to 10 older people and people living with dementia per day for over 15 years from the Gathering Place. And unfortunately, the service only able to attract an average of 5 people per day because of the size and the facilities of the Gathering Place. So Adult Services sought a new venue, and Ilted House in Voluntary was, which is also the head office of the Vale Glamorgan Voluntary Service, and the new venue office offers space for a range of local third sector organisations and small start-up businesses. The contract with Havard Care to provide the day service in Western Vale has expired and is now being provided with an annual letter of understanding, which does not offer either the provider or the council adequate safeguards in the long term. So if I go to the recommendations, the contents of this report be noted and considered in connection with Part 2 report later on the meeting agenda. The Cabinet notes the urgency procedure set out in Section 1514 of the Council's Constitution to be used in respect to the recommendations contained within the Part 2 report. I so move.
Thank you, Eddie, and very happy to second that. And I think that it's worth explaining that the use of Section 1514, the urgency procedure, is so we can get on and deliver the scheme, isn't it? So I think Gwyn wants to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to support what my colleague has just said, Leader. It provides a superb facility for older people, and it's so important that we continue this service because so many people are isolated at home, and a minibus goes around and picks them up and takes them there, which is absolutely great. Thank you.
Thanks. No, it sounds like an excellent service. And no, sorry, do you want to come back in?
If I just come back, there was one note that I wanted to emphasise, was that part of the retendering process will include the older people, the people that the service is for. So, you know, it's not something that we're doing off our own.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, the social care team are absolutely committed to service user involvement in any service delivery, aren't they? So they've got quite a reputation for that. But no, I think it would be good, and I think that, you know, when they're talking about the implications of isolation for people in this group, that it's absolutely essential. So wholehearted support. Thanks for that. But you have lots of reports today, so we can move on to agenda item 16, and that's the annual corporate safeguarding report. So that's back to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Leader. as you say, this is about the safeguarding report, and it's key for me to make note of the fact people think it's just a social services responsibility, but it covers across the whole of the council, and it involves all the various directorates. So there is a corporate responsibility to ensure that there are effective arrangements in place for safeguarding children and adults who require specific council services. This annual report 24-25 provides an overview of the corporate safeguarding activities taking place across the authority. And if you see in the background, as I mentioned, it's crossing all the directorates, social services, learning skills, corporate resources, environment, housing. Although, having said that, some of those names will probably change in the future due to the change from main scrutiny. The Social Services and Wellbeing Act puts in a duty to report, and it's a responsibility for anybody to report anything that concerns they have. And there's a working together in to safeguarding people guidance under Part 7 of the Act, which provides advice on what should happen if an individual is concerned about the well-being of the welfare of a child or an adult. As far as the council is concerned, we've increased our effectiveness on DBS checks across, and recognising it's not just the council here, it's the schools included, and all of those we've regularly done an 100% check, so really pleased with that. There's also an aspect of violence against women, domestic abuse and social violence in the region. We've got a regional strategy, and that continues to deliver positive outcomes for those that are subject to that. And we've got overarching objectives that have been agreed. We've also got a corporate safeguarding data dashboard, which gives us detail, up-to-date detail, specific on certain areas, the number of people that are involved, children or adults, and there are processes in place to investigate that and resolve as necessary. And there's a corporate safeguarding group that's overlooked at many of the policies and procedures that we've got. And there was a recent internal audit, which action plans, and they've been followed up with a number of recommendations, and further review of those. Council made they found the audit found there was a reasonable insurance, which is excellent. And also, I'd like to put as part of the report that with the current changes we've got with scrutiny happening, that the 6 monthly interim reports to Cabinet and scrutiny committees is discontinued. And that's to reflect the changes in scrutiny committee arrangements. But I would add that there's still an ability to add pertinent information anytime through the information reporting facility that we've got. And it's expected that any significant safeguarding developments across would be added for members' information using this facility. So with that in mind, I'll go to the recommendations. The Cabinet notes the work that's been undertaken to improve corporate arrangements for safeguarding and protecting children and adults. The Cabinet reviews annual reports on work carried out to improve corporate safeguarding arrangements and the effectiveness of relevant policies. This report is shared with members by adding it to the information reporting facility for scrutiny committees on the committee hub. And the Cabinet no longer receives a 6 monthly interim report. I so move.
Thanks, Eddie. I think that seems very sensible, that we all know where the information is, and it's our responsibility to access it as necessary. So I can see that Rhiannon's got a hand up, so I won't second, and I'm assuming that she'll want to. So over to you, Rhiannon.
Done it again. Sorry. Yes. No, I'd like to second it. I mean, I'm always pleased to hear these reports and that, the very high uptake of, checking that people are prepared to undergo in order to continue their work with children, adults and, other vulnerable people. and particularly obviously from my viewpoint in education, but also the domestic violence work, because domestic violence is one of the adverse childhood experiences that affect children and their ability to get the most advantage out of education, because, you know, a disruptive and unhappy home life is, I mean, we all know that as adults, we've seen it in other people, and for children, it's particularly difficult. It creates, you know, mental health problems that are very difficult to eradicate and will probably last them for their whole lives and have impact on the way they conduct relationships. So I'm very pleased with the safeguarding report, as always. Thank you.
Thank you. So Rhiannon seconded, but we've still got Sandra coming in now.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to second, well, not second, to agree with what the other two councillors had to say. And actually, you know, the sort of the work that is undertaken together on the safeguarding board, so the community safety team, and the work that they do around domestic violence is really important for the council in passing on information that they've received, so that both schools and social services are aware of instances of domestic violence that might have happened where there's children in the household, so that schools can be aware of, you know, what children, when they're coming into school, what they've actually faced, perhaps overnight or over the weekend and things like that, and then make the provision then for them to, you know, sort of have the extra support that they might need. But obviously Rhiannon, Councillor Birch will know more about that than me. But I just think it's really important that we recognise that, you know, that the Vale Council works together to ensure that we provide a service of safeguarding for all residents of the Vale. So thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. So we've had it moved, seconded and thirded, and everyone else is in agreement. So that's super. Thank you. And then there's this is always a really interesting report, isn't it? This is another report for Eddie, Cabinet Member, Social Care and Health, and this is the annual report of the Director of Social Services. It never gets enough mention, does it, Eddie? So hopefully you're going to put that right.
Oh, thanks for that, Leader. I was just going to say, refer to another meeting, you get all the detail. Okay, so, right, this challenge version of the Director's Report was considered by the Live Well Scrutiny Committee in May, and the committee members provided positive feedback, so that's good news. A finalised version following feedback from partners was presented to Cabinet for approval, and I'll explain that again in a minute. The report contains several priorities which the Director of Social Services and the Social Services Senior Management Team has determined, and they've been set in context of significant increases in demand. Cabinet has asked to agree these improvement priorities. When I talk about the finalised version, this, you know, as a council, we involve the health boards. We've got third sector partners. Without those, we wouldn't be able to deliver the services. And the directors encompassed all of those within this report. It's quite incredible, isn't it? It's so comprehensive that I really hope that the public will look at those and just see the variety and the range, scope of, and the number of people that the council and its partners support and provide services for. For me, there's a couple of highlights. It does mention the demands. The demands are increasing, not only in numbers, but in complexity of what people are coming up with. And so within the report, the director talks about what's happened, what we've done over the year, where we are now, and what we're hoping to achieve. And each of those sections are listed within the report. I mentioned the scrutiny, and they've gone through it. If it's remiss of me to be sat here, because the report was presented to the scrutiny, and you should be able to see from the director's view, because it's his report, that's, you know, what are the highlights within the report, and you'll get a better overview of what's in there. I think that's enough for me to say, really, because I'm sure that other colleagues will add a bit more. And yeah, I'll just go on for the rest of the day talking about the benefits. For example, in the last year, the adults services, for example, in hospitals, they're waiting. I can't believe I'm going to say it, but we had over 100 people waiting for assessments to get out of hospital. And it wasn't just a couple of days, it was for weeks. And you just think to yourself, that's not right. Well, that's something that the adult services have addressed. So now we've got a trusted assessors in the hospitals, and as soon as they're aware that the individual is going to come out of the hospital, they assess. And you think that's just a straightforward process. The individual came from home, we'll send them straight back from home. But often they end up with additional needs. So the home might not be the right place. Although that's the first place we want people to go to, some individuals don't actually want that because of the isolation. So just that one issue on its own is quite complex. So we end up with care packages. Some people go home with additional care packages. So that I'm just indicating that's an improvement that we've got over the last year. I'd like to mention more about the Children and Young People Service, that there is an increase in demand on that as well, and the complexity. But even in the last year, we've got some residential homes that Sandra will talk about with the housing side, that we provide for a couple of individuals that got nowhere else to go. The families can't support them, and we're putting them on a trajectory of life where we've looking at what their needs are. We're helping them to understand where they are in their life and making changes. We've had some individuals, one in particular I can speak of, that has come from that environment and is now a council employee because he was on the right trajectory, whereas at the time he would have gone off the rails. So there are two stories I can give. I say I can probably go on for hours, but I'll better leave it at that. I'll better go to recommendations, don't I? So the Cabinet considers the content of the report, approves the Director's annual report for 24-25, which is attached to Appendix 1, and agrees the improvement priorities for social services set out in the Director's annual report for 24-25. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. I mean, this is a super report, and you mentioned about how hospital discharges. I think we've all known how people who are ready to come home, and by the time arrangements were made, they'd caught some form of infection or something else had gone wrong, and then they got stuck in there a bit longer, and then by the time they're ready, and by the time it happened, and you can end up with weeks, and at which point the person is I think the technical term is deconditioned. It means maybe they're a bit more unsteady on their feet, or ability to live independently. And what's always struck me about the ethos of our team is it's always, I mean, you've just mentioned about the design of the older people's day services. It's always coming at it from the perspective of the service user, the person that they are caring for. And when you look at some of the outcomes, like you, I could go on for ages, but I think in seconding the recommendations, could I suggest that you might like to add our heartfelt thanks to the Director and the staff of our Social Services Directorate for their phenomenal work this year. And it really doesn't get recognised anything like enough. Is that okay? Can I put words in your mouth?
From me, that would be understood, but I think from the Cabinet it would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. I can't see anyone else. Oh, Gwyn, did you want to come in?
Yes, please, Leader. I endorse everything you just said. But certainly, I think that this is an exceptional report, and quite honestly, the way we've moved forward is quite incredible. As we mentioned about people being stuck in hospital for so long, in the past, it was a case of, will I ever get out? Will I ever get home again? Will I ever get a care home? But this is quite incredible that you can come out of hospital within a couple of days. These now, and I mean, I go back to a few years ago. It was about saving lives, where people were ready to come out, and as you said, they picked something else up. I know of 2 or 3 people from Landward ended with COVID and passing away in hospital. And had they been around now, they would have got out of hospital without the threat on their life. So this is fantastic, and I endorse every comment you made. That absolutely fantastic group we got in social services these days and the work they're doing.
Yeah. And it's
Thank you.
also, thank you, it's also good to know that they are widely respected across Wales, aren't they? So, yeah, I was going to say that. So I can see that I've got Councillor Birch wanting to come in. Over to you, Rhiannon.
Sorry, I don't seem to be able to shut up today. I'm obviously really pleased with the report. I mean, I'm only going to pick out a couple of points. I mean, the support for young carers. Councillor Burnett and I went to a young carers group at St Sire's within the last couple of months, and some of those children are bearing a much heavier burden than we expect children to. And it was really gratifying to see how much support the school was offering them, and how they were able to speak about their experiences and ask for extra help where needed, because of course many children don't actually want to identify themselves as young carers because they're afraid of what their contemporaries are going to say. They don't really want people to know they're helping to put their mother to bed every night, or they're assisting with personal care for a sibling, because that isn't always seen as being something laudable, although we would consider it to be. Children may not feel that the same way. So that support for young carers across the Vale is very welcome, and recognition of who they are, because even though they may not want to have extra concessions made for them and so forth, it's important we know that those children are carrying a burden beyond that any normal child should have to carry. And also I'd like to pick out the Flying Start, because I've probably said it many times that where a child starts from should not reflect where that child ends up. And Flying Start helps many children step out of a cycle of possible deprivation, poverty, unemployment, etc., because it's assisting children and their parents to improve their lot in life, whether that's through advice or further education, putting them in touch with other adults who may be able to offer guidance beyond the scope of social services. And the recognition by 73% of parents saying that the Flying Start scheme is excellent is very gratifying. And we can only hope that this will translate in improved life chances for those children in the future. I mean, there is other stuff, but most of it, quite a lot of it's already been mentioned, so I will repeat it.
Thanks, Rhiannon. And it's interesting you mentioning Flying Start, because I know that Wales kept that going when it was cancelled in England, but I understand it's coming back in England. So that's really good news that the new government has decided that that's worthwhile. And interestingly, I was, there was a message sent out saying, are there any sort of learning points from Flying Start that's been done? So we'll have to feed back into that at a UK level. But that's excellent. Thank you. So that is proposed, seconded. I always have to double check when we've been talking for this long, and everybody has agreed it. So that's super.
I was just trying to see if I could find what it was called, but.
And
yeah.
then I think it's Sure Start in England, wasn't it?
It was Sure Start. I try and think what the new name was. That's what I was just looking forward to.
And anyway, agenda item 18, still with Eddie, and this is your exciting bit as well, isn't it? This is acquisition of properties for social services. So over to you.
Yeah, I hope the public don't think that we're running around trying to buy every property in the Vale, because that's not the case. But if you look at this report, social services got a number of buildings, and the people who use them recognise that they've been around for some time, and the reality is they're not fit for purpose. We talk about change in services and, you know, in keeping with what we provision. Even, you know, the accessibility is challenging on some of them. So the purpose of this report is to acquire a building which is fit for that purpose and provide more opportunities for those service users. Unfortunately, because of the commercial aspects, it needs to be in a part 2. So I'll just move the recommendation, which is contents of this report be noted and considered in connection with the part 2 report later on in the meeting agenda.
Your audio was picked up.
Right. Yeah, that's okay. We were just double checking because Eddie's visual went, but we still had the audio, so we didn't miss any of your report, because otherwise you'd have had to do it all again. So yeah.
From the start.
And right, so at that point we're at agenda item 24, which is any urgent items. I don't have any. We now have to move on to the part 2 part of the agenda, which, as I'd mentioned, we've actually got 4 items for discussion under that. These are matters that are considered to be confidential, and therefore we need to move into private session for discussion. And so I'm going to, we have to agree to do that, and then I'll be asking the Cabinet Officer to stop the live stream. So if I can formally move part 2.
And I'll formally second.
And as I said, if I can ask the Cabinet Officer to stop the live stream and to ensure that only relevant parties remain from this point.